Hello everyone and welcome back to Foot Forecast, and today's video we're going through my Premier League roundup. And the first game I'm going to start with is Leeds United at home to Arsenal. And pre-match I thought this was going to be a difficult game for Arsenal going away to Leeds. Leeds have been a real strong side recently and they've been very difficult to beat. Newcastle the only side that won against them recently, and Saka was injured in the warm-up, so that was a big injury for Arsenal. The other significant news is that Kai Havertz started over Odegaard and Eze. They were both benched for this game. So a big decision from Mikel Arteta. And it was Arsenal that went 1-0 up, and it was through a set piece in this game. Leeds cleared the initial ball, but it came back out to Madueke, who put in a good cross into Zubamendi, who headed the ball into the back of the net. And then Arsenal scored directly from a corner after this. A great delivery in from Madueke. Darlow has to do better at his front post and deal with it, but he doesn't, and he ends up putting it into the back of his own net. And Arsenal throughout this game continue to be a threat from set pieces, as they usually are. And it's one of their main weapons that they currently have, probably their biggest weapon. That is the difference between them and the rest of the league right now. Arsenal then went 3-0 up through victories after a great initial pass from Martin Odegaard to find Martinelli, who then put a good cross into victories, who finished off the chance to make it 3-0 to Arsenal. And Arsenal had more chances to make it 4-0. Jesus had a great chance after an excellent delivery from Timber, but he couldn't put the ball into the back of the net. It was a great save from Carl Darlow. But then Jesus did make it 4-0 Arsenal. That was a great goal by Gabriel Jesus, probably the best goal in the game. 4 individual performances for this game. I'm not really going to look at any specific ones for Leeds. They were disappointing across the board, pretty average performances from Leeds United. In terms of Arsenal, Gabriel, Rice and Madueke were excellent. I was especially impressed by Madueke, considering he'd just come in for Bukayo Saka. For Leeds United, I'm not really going to talk about too many individual performances. They were pretty average across the board, and Arsenal just showed their quality in this game. There were definitely some standout performances from Arsenal. Gabriel, Rice and Madueke were brilliant. Looking at what this means, Leeds are still 6 points clear of West Ham, who are in 24th. And look, it's a poor result, but against the team that looks like they're going to be champions, and considering you're a newly promoted side, it's not the end of the world. And I think Leeds fans can forgive a result like this because they have been good recently. In terms of Arsenal, they have extended their gap over Aston Villa and Manchester City. And Aston Villa, they extend the gap by another 3 points. And that is because Aston Villa lost 1-0 at home to Brentford. A poor result for Aston Villa in this game. And simply, Villa just couldn't break down a low block throughout in this game. Villa are short of players right now. They've got some key injuries. But the good news for Villa is that Tammy Abraham and Douglas Luiz were available for Villa in this game. And Abraham had a massive chance early on, but it was a good save by Queven Kelleher, who was excellent throughout in this game. Then Kevin Schade missed a massive chance after a Coyote long throw. Schade will be kicking himself with this. He just miskicked it. Then Conce had a big chance from a set piece, but he's not the sort of player you wanted in that position, considering he had to shoot it off his foot and not his head. Schade was then sent off for Brentford in this game after a kick out at Cash. It's absolutely stupid. There's no other way to explain this decision, and he's absolutely cost his team in this situation. And that means Schade is unavailable for the next 3 games for Brentford, a key player for Brentford. But it was Brentford that actually went 1-0 up in this game just before half-time through Dango Atara on the counter-attack. A brilliant finish past Emi Martinez. And this goal was crucial for Brentford. They needed to take the 1-0 lead, so they had something to defend against Villa. And then they could sit in their low block, which they did so effectively. Kelleher then made another good save from a Sancho shot. Abraham actually thought he equalised for Aston Villa in this game, but the ball did go out, so it was disallowed. And as I've already said, Villa just couldn't break down this low block, and they had similar problems in the Everton game at home, where they also lost 1-0. And this is one of the major skills you need in terms of winning a title, the ability to break down a low block. And it is the hardest step to take because it's the most challenging. And there's only a couple of sides in this league that are actually very good at doing this. And Villa right now aren't one of them. They're decent at it, but they're not excellent at it like you have to be. And I think that was proven in today's game where they couldn't break it down despite Brentford having 10 players. Kelleher did make some good saves, but they weren't hugely challenging. In terms of some individual performances for Aston Villa, I thought everyone was pretty crap or pretty disappointing across the boards. I thought Cash, though, and Conser were good on the right-hand side of the defence for Villa in today's game. So what does this mean for the table? As I said, Villa are now 7 points behind Arsenal. And look, Villa aren't out of the title race, but I just can't quite see this happening. I think they'll struggle to stay consistent for the rest of the season with European football, FA Cup and Premier League. But there is a chance they could be a consistent side by the end of the season because Villa did prove they can do this in the Liga run that they had earlier in the season where they were absolutely outstanding. But these are the sort of games where I do see Villa being tripped up. In terms of Brentford, I mean, that's a huge result for Brentford. Brentford are now 7th place in the Premier League, and they are 4 points behind the top 5, which is what you'd think for Champions League football. Brentford can get in top half, would be an amazing finish. If they could somehow get into Europe, that would be incredible considering the players they lost at the start of the season. And some people even saying Brentford may get relegated. I think a major concern for Villa in this game was the fact they've now lost 2 home games in a row, and this didn't seem possible before this because Villa's home form is one of the best in the league. So then we're on to the next game, which involved a team in the title race, and that was between Spurs and City. There is actually a full review available on the YouTube channel now if you want to check that out, but this is a bit more of a shorter review. And the first thing I want to talk about is Spurs' starting lineup. They went for a 5-back in this game. My concern with this lineup was the fact that clearly Spurs were going to sit in and stay in a low block, but where was their pace to sort of hit City on the counter-attack? And it was non-existent. That's because Odobert and Matthijs Tel were on the bench. And look, in fairness to Spurs, they didn't have a lot of first-team players available for this game. Looking at City, they decided to play O'Reilly in midfield for this game, and then Ian Nori went in to left back. And the 2 goals that Spurs conceded came down to sort of mucking around with the ball, being too slow on the ball and some poor passing. The first goal is poor from Basuma in possession, and Dragusin is poor on the second goal, giving the ball away in midfield. In fairness to both of these players, neither of them have got a passing option. Cherki's finish for the first goal was very good off his right foot. Antoine Semenyo's finish was very simple, and this gave City a 2-0 lead, and it could have been more going into half-time. Haaland had a massive chance, but he put it over the bar, very unlike Haaland. It was a very good ball from Rodri to find him. Something I noticed with this is I think Van de Ven's lack of pace was shown in that Van de Ven may have got back and contended with Haaland a lot better. There was a couple of moments in the first half where Spurs showed some pressing intensity, and they were actually quite good winning the ball high up the pitch, but they didn't do this enough, and City were finding it so easy to knock the ball around Spurs, and Cherki almost walked through the Spurs defence because of this, but it was a great save by Vicario to deny him and stopping City scoring more goals in that first half. And as always with Spurs, in the first half they were slow and negative, and the crowd was quite literally cheering if the ball moved forward, and they were booing if the ball was going backwards, because they've had enough. They want the ball to be progressed up the pitch. You can't win football games as a top side if you're not getting the ball up the pitch, and they just weren't doing this. And when they did it, it was very slow build-up, and this meant that Spurs only had 2 shots in the first half, and one was from a free kick, and another one was a simple block for the City defenders. And going into halftime, it looked very comfortable for Manchester City. Spurs decided to make a change, go to a 4 at the back. I liked this change because I thought they'd be more threatening on the counter with an extra midfielder, and the change was actually Sarr for Romero. Romero must have an injury to force that change, because this meant that you had Dragusin and Palhinha as your 2 centre-halves, 2 players I wouldn't want at centre-half, despite Palhinha actually having a very good game for Spurs in centre-half. And Spurs did look brighter after a half-time. Udogie had a good chance, but it was a good save by his national teammate in Donnarumma. And Spurs eventually did make it 2-1 through Dominic Solanke after a really good ball in behind from Xavi Simons, who was excellent in that second half. And it looked like Gay actually put the ball into the back of his own net. It's been awarded as a Solanke goal. That is 100% a foul by Dominic Solanke on Mark Gay. I'm not hearing any different. It was a clear foul, but for some reason VAR missed this, and this meant that Spurs did get back into this game, and Spurs were improving throughout. They looked better in transition, And then Spurs did come from 2-0 down. A great scorpion kick from Solanke to make it 2-2. He does have that sort of inventive finish in him. We've seen this in the past. It was great work by Conor Gallagher to win the ball back, and it was a great cross. And after this, City were quite rattled. Odobert had a chance to make it 3-2 after some great work from Xavi Simons driving up the pitch. Donnarumma then made another save after a deflected Xavi Simons shot, and this came from Xavi Simons winning the ball high up the pitch, and that's what I love from Spurs in that second half. They play with intensity, they play with pressing, they look to win the ball high up, and we need to see this way more from Spurs. I think what City should have done different in that second half is go more direct into Erling Haaland and Semenyo, but they didn't do this enough, and they struggled to get out. And this is the problem with City. I just don't think they can stay consistent. With performances like that, they will not win the league, and they are basically handing Arsenal the title. For Spurs, it's a great result coming from behind. What's disappointing for me is why can't Spurs start like that from minute one? Why do they have to wait to go 2-0 down to perform at that level? It's a problem. And that's why I wouldn't keep Frank, because he's a negative and pragmatic manager. And that's the sort of tactics that he employs. He wants them to be pragmatic and defensive, but they need to be more attacking. Looking at the table now, Spurs are 14th place. They are 9 points now above the relegation zone. I wouldn't say they're definitely safe yet, but that is a good result for Spurs. And every side below them has dropped points so far this weekend. Then looking at City, City are now 6 points behind Arsenal, and it's looking like it's going to be difficult to catch them. The issue is that Arsenal will drop points. It's just I don't back City to capitalise. I don't back Villa to capitalise, and I don't back any of the other teams under Villa to capitalise. That is the problem right now with this title race. No side can stay consistent. If a side goes on a 10-game run, they probably win the title, but I don't see any side right now doing this. So then we're on to a game where two sides in good form played each other, and that was between Manchester United and Fulham. A very good game to watch, and there were early chances in this game for Manchester United, but Fulham had the biggest chance, and it came from a corner. Cuenca won the header at back post from a short corner after a delivery from Harry Wilson, and he knocked it down to Anderson, and he nearly scored, but Lemans made a good save to deny Fulham early on in this game. Cunha thought he'd won a penalty, but the initial challenge from Cuenca was given as outside of the box instead of inside the box. This is the fair call because he actually makes a good challenge inside the box. That's Cuenca. The issue is that he grabs into Cunha's shirt before he enters the box, but this didn't matter because Manchester United went 1-0 up from the corner. Great ball in from Bruno and a header from Casemiro to put Manchester United 1-0 up. He's continuing to be a threat in the air, is Casemiro. Leno then after half-time had to make a big save after a great ball from Dalot into Mbeumo. And I think Brian Mbeumo probably should have gone around the keeper in this situation. If he does this, I'm pretty confident he puts United 2-0 up. But then United did go 2-0 up, and it was through Matheus Cunha, a good finish at the near post. And it was a good ball by Casemiro to pick him out. Fulham then thought they had a route back into this game through Cuenca, but it was offside, and it came from a free kick. Sesko then hit the post with his first touch of the game, a header after a great cross by Amad Diallo. Fulham then did find their route back into the game, and it was through a Raul Jimenez penalty, a brilliant penalty actually from Raul Jimenez, dispatched it into the top left-hand corner, and he did actually win the penalty as well. Maguire conceded it. Jimenez actually shoots, and then Maguire does take him out, so sometimes you don't see those given. The problem is that this potentially stopped Jimenez putting the ball into the back of the net after Lemans made the save, and it was actually a top save from Lemans in goal. And then Fulham remarkably made it 2-0 after a brilliant strike from outside the box from Kevin, but United responded in Fergie time in the 94th minute to win the game. It was a stunning finish actually from Benjamin Sesko. It's a cracking finish, and there's nothing Leno can do about it. And it was a great ball by Bruno to play him in. He got 2 assists in today's game. I thought in terms of some individual performances, Lemans, Casemiro and Martinez were great for United. So it's another win for Manchester United. The third win in a row for Michael Carrick. And I actually said before this game, I think this is a big test for Carrick because I actually expected United to have more of the ball, and that's been a problem for them all season. United won 1 out of 13 games where they've had more than 50% of the ball, and I actually think it was a major mistake from Fulham not allowing United to have the ball in this game. If I'm Fulham, I would have forced United to break me down and then I would just hit them on the break time after time, because that's been an issue for Manchester United all season. You can overrun that midfield on the counter-attack. And people say it's not the same now because Amron is gone. I'm still convinced this side will struggle to break down a low block, and so far we haven't really seen that. So I think whoever plays the next, which I'm pretty sure is Spurs, so I wouldn't be surprised if Frank does this, should sit in a low block and then hit United on the counter, especially if you're going away to Old Trafford. And I think that is a mistake that Marco Silva made in today's game. And he nearly was rewarded though for this more attacking style, as Fulham nearly got a point out of this game. These two sides are actually two of the best sides to watch right now in the Premier League. And Fulham have some exciting players like Harry Wilson, like Kevin, and Oscar Bob, who's just signed Fulham. I think that's a top signing from Fulham. I think he's a massive talent that's just struggled to get minutes for City because of the new signing of Semenyo, Doku, Savinho, those sort of players, as well as Bob's been injured for the whole of the season. But I think we're about to see how good of a player Oscar Bob really is, and I expect them to excel for Fulham. In terms of the table, Fulham are 8th place in the Premier League. It's very congested in the middle, but right now that may be enough for European football. A very good season so far for Fulham. For Manchester United, they are 4th place in the Premier League. The crucial thing for United is to try get back into the Champions League, and that is also crucial for Chelsea to be in the Champions League by the end of the season. And they got a dramatic 3-2 win over West Ham. But it didn't start well for Chelsea in this game, and that was due to the starting lineup from Chelsea. As usual with Chelsea, we've seen that they're very inclined to rest players. And look, I think some of the players definitely needed a rest, but I also think that comes down to basically what the higher-ups are saying that Liam Rosinha must do. And that's why I think that Gittins, Garnacho, Badiashile, Gerald Hato all started in this game. Liam Delap started up front as well for Chelsea. And with that sort of lineup, I think you've underestimated a Premier League side like West Ham. West Ham may not be great, but if you put out a weak lineup, they will definitely cause you problems. And they did this immediately through Jarrod Bowen. Good work initially from Aaron Wan-Bissaka to win the ball back and then get the ball into Jarrod Bowen, who puts in a cross, not even looking at the ball, and it was just a cross, but it was a really dangerous delivery, and it eventually ends up going all the way in. In fairness to Robert Sanchez in goal here, who's probably being blamed by some people, he doesn't know if this takes a deflection. He doesn't know if a West Ham player gets on the end of it, because there were West Ham players in the box, and that means he's slow to react to it, and the ball does end up in the back of the net, giving West Ham a 1-0 lead in this game. And West Ham were a real threat on the break in that first half. Garnacho's definitely also at fault for this. He loses out on the 50-50 to Aaron Wan-Bissaka. And West Ham were a threat on the break. Chelsea was struggling to contain them. And it was outstanding play for the West Ham second goal. This is one of the better goals you will see. A great diag from Mavropanos to Bowen. Then Bowen played the ball into Wan-Bissaka down the right-hand side. Poor tracking from Garnacho, once again at fault. And then he cuts it back to Summerville as Wan-Bissaka, who finishes it brilliantly to put West Ham 2-0 up. And Wan-Bissaka was brilliant in this game, especially in that first half. And when Summerville's on form, he's a top player, and we saw that at Leeds. But the problem is that he's not consistently at a high level. So you get sort of spurts or runs of games where he looks really dangerous. West Ham were a massive threat down that right-hand side in the first half, and they had 70% of the ball. Chelsea fans and players were arguing at halftime, and I would say rightfully so. And this resulted in Chelsea making 3 changes. Cucurella for Hato. Hato was poor in that first half. Fofana for Badiashile. Badiashile was average in that first half, not great. He wasn't as bad though as Hato. And the change that had to happen, Pedro for Garnacho. Garnacho was the main culprit for those 2 goals, just being lazy. It's that simple. As a winger in the Premier League these days, you cannot be that poor in your tracking, and you've got to be good defensively and willing to help out your fullback, and he left Hato stranded. Hato wasn't great either, but he left Hato with basically no chance. And after half-time, not a lot actually changed for the first 5 minutes. West Ham were on top once again. Fernandes with a good shot from outside the box. Bowen had a massive chance from a quick free kick. It was well played in by Fernandes, and he should have put the ball into the back of the net, but he failed to do so. And look, I think he was probably offside, so you can let Jarrod Bowen off. And after this, the game completely switched, and it was basically Chelsea dominating. João Pedro got Chelsea back into the game. A good header after a good ball into the box from Wesley Fofana. 2 changes working for Rafinha, Fofana and João Pedro coming on at half-time. And then there was some sustained pressure from Chelsea. They were taking corners quickly. They were keeping the intensity up and it was working. And it resulted in Caicedo nearly scoring. It was actually a very good save from Areola, saving the shot from outside the box. And then West Ham decided to shift to a 5 at the back. Pablo for Kilman, to get more defensive and stay in a low block. And look, I didn't mind that change from Nuno. He had to change something because West Ham were getting battered. It was only a matter of time before they were going to concede, were West Ham in this game. What I would say is maybe a better change would have been to pack the midfield, because at this point Chelsea were dominating the midfield and they were overrunning it. And then Chelsea did equalise in this game through Marc Cucurella. Kilman actually did really well to head the ball away, but unfortunately Delap was behind him and it hit Delap, and then Delap hit the crossbar, and then Cucurella was there to head the ball in. I don't blame Max Kilman in this situation because he actually won it. He was just unlucky the fact that Delap was right behind him. There's not a lot more he could have done in that situation. And actually, West Ham did have one last chance to win the game through Todibo, but he missed it from 4 yards out. He'll be kicking himself with that miss. It was a big chance. And after this, Chelsea were just building pressure, and they did find the winner through Enzo Fernandez, once again coming up with a big moment. It was a great finish after a good cutback from João Pedro. And after this, Todibo actually got himself sent off for grabbing João Pedro around the neck. Once you do this, it's an obvious red card. It's stupid from Todibo, and now he's suspended for 3 games. And that is crucial because they need him in their bid to survive in the Premier League. As now Max Kilman will come in. And despite Kilman having a good game, I thought, throughout, he is still a player that's really struggled in a West Ham shirt. And West Ham did have one more chance from a corner, but Chelsea got away. And that was the end of this game. 3 points for Chelsea, 3 good points coming from behind. And there is a key takeaway for Chelsea in this game for the manager and the board. Don't rest in Premier League games like this. You can't afford to weaken your side this much. And if you wanted to be able to do this, then you had to buy better players. Because Chelsea have spent 1.5 billion. But if you look at the depth coming off their bench, it's not actually that good. Look, Esteval was not playing in this game because of a personal situation. But there is also a real lack of quality for Chelsea, I think, in certain positions. And we saw that in today's game. Chelsea are now 5th on the table in the Premier League, and that should be enough for Champions League football. You would expect if they finish 5th at the end of the season. West Ham are 6 points away from safety. I still have them going down, but they still have shown more promise in the last couple of weeks than before. They'll be gutted the fact they threw away a 2-goal lead and they didn't even get a point from this game, because West Ham needs to be picking up points in these sort of games where they have opportunities to do so. So then we're on to the next game, which was between Liverpool and Newcastle. There was actually a full review for this game, so you can check that out if you want to. Liverpool went with a pretty stock standard lineup. For Newcastle, the key for this lineup is, first of all, there was no striker. They decided not to play Voltemada and Wissa, and they went with pure pace in the break, which I thought was a pretty good decision from Newcastle. This is where they were most likely going to be able to hit Liverpool, because Liverpool have a weakness on the break. And still no Bruno in the midfield for Newcastle, which was a big miss for this game. And Newcastle started well, and the other area where you can get at Liverpool is from set pieces. They're not good at dealing with them at all. But overall, Liverpool did pretty well. They got through the set pieces and the early pressure from Newcastle. Barnes was unlucky to hit the post early on this game. And it was a great ball by Hall early into that first sort of 25 minutes of the game. But no one could get on to the end of it. And look, this is not what you expect from Liverpool when you play them at Anfield, but this season Liverpool have been completely different from what you would expect. Usually Liverpool are the team fast out of the gates and putting the other side under pressure. And after the first sort of 30 minutes, Liverpool started to look like more of a threat. They were creating some chances. But what this did mean is that they were more vulnerable on the counter-attack, as Liverpool were starting to push 2 midfielders up the pitch, which we've seen so far this season has caused massive problems on the counter-attack. And that is exactly what happened. Newcastle bypassed the midfield Elanga did well to drag Newcastle up the pitch. He then put the ball into Barnes. Barnes lost the ball because of a challenge by McAllister, but it fell to Gordon and he put the ball into the back of the net. Kirkies, I think, could have got closer to the man and blocked the shot, but it was a brilliant goal from Gordon, a player that's been low on confidence recently. But Liverpool did hit back immediately in this game. Converts with a brilliant piece of skill and work to get the ball to Ekitike, who finished the chance off. And then Ekitike put Liverpool 2-1 up. Those two recently been combining really well for Liverpool in games. And then Ekitike put Liverpool 2-1 up about 2 minutes later. It's a great ball from Kirkies to find Ekitike. And the finish is absolutely outstanding, using the outside of his right foot. He is a top player, is Ekitike. His overall play and his finishing has been excellent so far in a Liverpool shirt. Frustration for Eddie Howe, considering Newcastle only 1-0 up earlier. And now they were 2-1 down going into half time. And Newcastle once again started the half while they were once again a threat from set pieces. But Liverpool did have chances. Ekitike had a big chance to make it 3-1, but he dragged the ball wide. Burn has to be doing better in this situation. He has to deal with it. It's that simple. Just put the ball out. Harvey Barnes then struck a good shot from outside the box, but it was a good save from Alisson in goal. And then Liverpool found the third goal of the game. They were just controlling the game well. It was a good pass from Salah into Wirtz, and it was a good finish from Wirtz into the bottom corner. And this pretty much did seal the win for Liverpool. Newcastle did switch their system completely and actually ended up going with 2 up front after previously having no strikers. It didn't result in a lot. And Newcastle, with a couple of changes at the end, they brought on Alex Murphy, and they were just preparing for the League Cup semi-final, as that is the main concern now for that game against Manchester City. They've got to overturn a 2-0 deficit. And it was great to see Ibu Konate get a goal right at the end. It was a bit of a messy goal, but after what's happened to his father, it was a great moment for Konate, and I'm sure he would have enjoyed that. And it was just great to see him get that goal. Looking at what this means for the table, well, it's a good 3 points for Liverpool. Liverpool were desperate for a win. They hadn't won in 5 going into this game, and they are 2 points away from United in 4th, and they're a point away from Chelsea. They're not where they want to be, but Liverpool aren't too far away from top 4. It'd still be a disappointing season, but they would have salvaged something at least. For Newcastle, I think Eddie Howe's starting to become under pressure now. They're 8 points away from top 4. There's a lot of traffic between them and Manchester United. And I do wonder, will Newcastle consider a change of manager at the end of the season? I think I'd give Howe 1 more year to turn it around, and then I would consider the change if he doesn't perform well enough. Slot is obviously under pressure at Liverpool, and he needs at least a top 4 finish, I would assume, to keep his job. Or he needs trophies and ideally the Champions League, but that does seem unlikely. Right now, I think Slot will probably get sacked at the end of the season, and Liverpool will make a change with a fresh start to the season. So then we've got Brighton at home to Everton, 2 sides that have been rather inconsistent so far this season, and they're sort of smack bang in the middle. Everton are actually in 9th, Brighton are in 13th. But there's only 3 points separating these 2 sides. And I think the first thing I want to talk about was Everton's starting lineup, because they actually started with 4 out-and-out centre-halves. So Braithwaite played as a left-back and O'Brien played as a right-back. And isn't that the most sort of Everton Moyes thing to do? I was surprised to see this though, no natural full-back. And Pickford made a good early save from a Welbeck shot, and Brighton had all the chances in the first half, and they dominated the early phases. Matoma had a big chance of his left foot, but he couldn't put the ball into the back of the net. And Everton didn't register a shot in the first half, but it did drastically improve actually in the second half. Dewsbury Hall had 2 big chances in the second half to at least get Everton back into the game, but he was unable to finish off the chances. The second shot was actually a very good save by Verbruggen. And the shots completely changed after half-time. Everton ended up having more shots in the second half, despite having 0 shots in the first half. But it was Brighton that got the opening goal through Pascal Gross. And this is a great goal from Brighton. Ayari with the assist, but it's Costulas' dummy that makes this goal. And Pascal Gross has a simple finish into the corner to put Brighton at 1-0 up. Matoma then scored for Brighton, but it was offside. The build-up to the goal was disallowed, and this was from a set piece. James Garner then right at the end had a shot, and Verbruggen made the save. But the save could only be parried out to Beto, who was there to put the chance away on his birthday to get Everton a point away at the Amex. And overall, I think that's a fair point for both sides. Everton were so poor in that first half, but were much better in the second half. And look, I think the substitutions of Alcaraz, Beto and Patterson really helped them in terms of changing the game. Looking at some performances for Brighton, Ayari, Gross, Kadioglu and Kostoulas with that dummy off the bench were crucial for them. And I think this game sort of summed up these two sides, and especially summed up Brighton, where they're just a bit strange, where they pick up points where you don't expect them to, where they perform well in parts in games but then perform poorly in other parts. And this was even more evident in this game, where it was a complete game of two halves. In terms of the table, as I've already said, Everton are 9th place in the league and Brighton are 13th place, but both very close, just sort of two mid-table sides. And this brings me on to the next game, which was between Bournemouth and Wolves, and Bournemouth were the away side for this game. And Wolves started really well at the Molineux in this game, and they've been impressive recently. Mane thought he had scored, but he was offside. Matheus Mane has been really impressive for Wolves recently, and it was a very fast start to the game from them, and Mane was involved with a lot. He may have been a bit greedy at points, maybe he could have laid it off to some other players, but as we saw throughout the game, I don't think it really would have made a difference. And it was actually Bournemouth who went 1-0 up in this game. A great volley from Krupi outside the box after some quick passing from Bournemouth. And Arokadare was then denied by Petrovic after a great cross by Hugo Bueno. That was a top save by Petrovic. And then Petrovic made another save. Arokadare had a massive chance, but he blazed over the bar. João Gomez then hit the post from a corner. So unlucky. That was the biggest chance. And after this, you're like, surely Wolves will get at least something from this game. But no, Bournemouth hit Wolves with a sucker punch, and it really was this. It was outstanding work from Ryan, the new signing, to dribble past a couple of players and then square it to Scott, who put the ball into the back of the net. And I'm convinced that Ryan player is going to be the next 80 million player, because he was a player that a lot of big clubs were interested in, but they'd all spent their transfer kitty in the summer, so a club like Bournemouth ended up getting him. Arokadare had another chance for Wolves right at the end of the game, and it just really wasn't his game. His overall play was good, but he just couldn't put the ball into the back of the net. And at the end of the day, as a striker, you need to be able to do this, especially when you're down near the bottom of the table. And Wolves can't afford to miss chances like this. And it wasn't just Arokadare. They all played pretty well today, did Wolves, but they just couldn't put the ball into the back of the net. And look, this has been an issue for Wolves all season, putting the ball in the back of the net. For Scott, Krupi and Petrovic, I thought they played really well for Bournemouth in today's game, and they were crucial in them getting 3 points. And look, they were lucky, I think, to get 3 points in this game. I don't think many Bournemouth fans would say they deserved it, but it's still a very good result. In terms of Bournemouth, they are now into 12th place, and they've now started to pick up their form. And they're a side, once they get into form, they're hard to stop. They've now picked up 10 points from a possible 12. And this is what Bournemouth are. Bournemouth are a side that have massive troughs, but also massive highs. And right now, it seems like they're going into one of those highs. For Wolves, they're on 8 points. They are 18 points away from safety, and I just can't see them staying up at all. It would take an absolute miracle, and I don't think that miracle is coming. So then we're on to the final game, and it was a crucial game for Forest and Palace, both down near the bottom of the table. And I think for both sides, and if they could win this game, they would pull themselves away from the relegation zone, especially Palace. Palace were desperate for a win in this game, and all sides under them actually dropped points going into this game. So this meant that they could only gain from this result. Some good news for Palace is that Munoz was back starting, and that was great to see if you are a Crystal Palace fan, because they have missed him hugely. Palace had a good chance at the start through Hughes and Lerma. For the Lerma shot, Sells was forced into a save, and it was Gibbs White that put Forest 1-0 up from the corner in this game. And after this, Palace had quite a few chances in this game. Forest also had a couple, but Palace were largely dominating this game. And then Nico Williams cleared the ball off the line with his hands, and this was obviously given as a red card. A moment of madness. I couldn't quite believe that he decided to this. He literally decided to Suarez this, and this was in the 45th minute, so there was no reason to do this. It wasn't like it was the final moments of the game, and there was and this basically screwed Forest's chances of winning this game. And up to this point, I actually thought Nico Williams was playing quite well. He made quite a few crucial interventions, some good challenges. And up to this point, I actually thought Nico Williams was playing quite well. He made quite a few good blocks, but it was all in vain because of this decision, and Sarr converted the penalty from the spot straight down the middle, and Palace all of a sudden were the favourites in this game. After being 1-0 down, one crucial mistake completely changed this game. And Palace actually didn't create a lot despite being the extra man up in the first 15 minutes. And this sort of continued throughout in this game. There weren't a lot of significant chances to talk about. One of them was Johnson against his former club, but he put the header wide. And Forest actually probably created more in that second half despite being down to 10 men because it suited them. They could hit Palace on the break. Palace aren't a great side in terms of breaking down sides because they are designed to play on the counter attack. So at the end, it did end in a 1-0 draw. Based off the scenario of the game, that's an excellent point for Forest and Sean Dyche. For Palace, that's a poor point, I would say. They did stop the poor results, but you've got to be winning this sort of game, especially when you have an extra player for 50 minutes. I thought for Forest that midfield three were excellent of Sangare, Gibbs-White and Elliot Anderson. In terms of what this means to the table, Forest are 6 points clear of West Ham and Palace are 9 points clear of West Ham. Both sides, I'm still confident, will stay in their division, but they're not out of it yet, as if they pick up a couple of poor results in a row and West Ham start picking up a couple of wins, and both sides have European football to deal with, and you would definitely expect Palace to go far in the Europa Conference League, so I'd be more worried about that if I was a Palace fan, and they may have to decide to rest either in the Premier League or the Conference League, because right now Palace as a side look like they're lacking energy, and I don't think they can afford to play the first team constantly across both competitions. The good thing is for Oliver Glasner is that Palace have signed some depth, but they've also lost some quality because of this, like Mark Gahey and potentially Mateta. Let me know your thoughts on this Premier League roundup, and if you enjoy this video, go subscribe to the channel as well as liking the video.